This is the Drake Passage, a stretch of ocean where the Atlantic and Pacific collide without restraint. No land to slow it down, no shelter from the storms. Waves rise like moving mountains. Winds scream across thousands of miles of open water. Here, ships don't sail. They endure. Temperatures hover near freezing. Ice forms without warning. Visibility vanishes in seconds. If something goes wrong, there is no rescue waiting nearby. No safe harbor. No second chances. For centuries, sailors have feared this place. Some never made it through. This is where the ocean shows its true power, and where survival is never guaranteed. The Drake Passage is one of the most feared stretches of ocean on Earth. It lies between the southern tip of South America, Cape Horn, and the northern edge of Antarctica. A vast, open corridor of water, nearly 1,000 kilometers wide, where no land exists to interrupt the movement of the sea. And that absence of land changes everything. Here, the Atlantic, Pacific, and Southern Oceans converge into a single, relentless force. There are no barriers, no coastlines to absorb energy, nothing to slow the motion of the planet's most powerful ocean current. The result is a region defined by constant motion. Waves rarely settle. Winds rarely stop. The surface of the water is almost never calm. For centuries, sailors have described the Drake Passage in the same way: unpredictable, unforgiving, and absolute. A place where control is an illusion and survival depends on endurance. Before the construction of the Panama Canal in 1914, as this passage was one of the primary maritime routes connecting the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, ships traveling between continents had little choice but to navigate these waters, and many paid the price. Wooden hulls splintered under pressure. Masts snapped in violent winds. Crews were pushed beyond physical and mental limits, often with no certainty of reaching the other side. Even today, with steel vessels, satellite navigation, and advanced forecasting systems, the Drake Passage has not lost its reputation. Modern ships still roll violently in its swells. Expeditions are still delayed or diverted by its storms, and every crossing carries a level of uncertainty that cannot be engineered away. Because this is not just another ocean route, it is a natural bottleneck for the most powerful ocean current on Earth. A place where global systems collide, where energy builds without restraint, and where the ocean reminds humanity of a simple truth. There are still places on this planet where nature is fully in control. The Drake Passage is one of them. To understand why the Drake Passage is so dangerous, you have to look at its geography. It sits at the very bottom of the world, between Cape Horn, the southernmost tip of Chile, and the Antarctic Peninsula. This narrow gap is the only place on Earth where the planet's oceans are allowed to flow completely uninterrupted around the globe. Unlike every other ocean region, there are no continents blocking the path. No Africa, no Australia, no North or South America. Just open water. The passage itself stretches roughly 800 to 1,000 kilometers across. Beneath the surface, it plunges to depths exceeding 4,000 meters in some areas, a vast cold expanse with no natural protection from wind or current. And that openness is what makes it so violent. Across most of the world, oceans are partially contained. Land masses break the energy of waves. Coastlines disrupt currents. Islands offer shelter. But here, none of that exists. The Drake Passage is part of a continuous belt of water that circles Antarctica, an unbroken ring that allows ocean energy to build and travel freely across thousands of kilometers. This means that waves generated far away, sometimes from the Indian or Pacific Oceans, can travel across the Southern Ocean and arrive here with full force. Nothing slows them down. Nothing weakens them. They simply grow. At the same time, the seafloor beneath the Drake Passage is uneven. Underwater ridges and trenches distort the movement of deep currents, pushing energy upward and amplifying surface conditions. This interaction between deep ocean structures and surface forces creates chaotic wave patterns, often unpredictable, often dangerous. It's not uncommon for waves here to exceed 10 to 15 meters in height. But more importantly, they don't arrive in clean, regular patterns. They collide, overlap, break from multiple directions, creating what sailors describe as a cross sea, a condition where the ocean feels unstable, almost violent beneath a vessel. There is no rhythm to follow, no pattern to anticipate, just constant motion. Above the water, the geography offers no relief either. Cape Horn, often associated with shelter, provides almost none. Storm systems move quickly across the region, and the Antarctic Peninsula does little to block wind or waves from entering the passage. The result is a corridor where forces are funneled, compressed, and intensified. A place where geography doesn't protect, it amplifies. And for anyone crossing it, that means one thing: there is nowhere to hide. What truly defines the Drake Passage is not just where it is, but how it behaves. At the heart of it all is a single, powerful system: the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. This is the strongest ocean current on Earth. It flows endlessly from west to east, circling Antarctica without interruption, carrying more water than all the world's rivers combined. It moves with a force that reshapes everything in its path. And the Drake Passage is its narrowest choke point. Here, that immense current is compressed, accelerated, and intensified. Water that has traveled thousands of kilometers suddenly funnels through a confined space. The speed increases, the energy builds, and the surface above becomes unstable. But the current alone does not create the chaos. Above it, the atmosphere is just as relentless. The Drake Passage sits within a band of extreme wind systems known to sailors for centuries: the roaring 40s, the furious 50s, and the screaming 60s. These are not just names, they describe reality. Westerly winds sweep across the Southern Ocean with almost no resistance. With no continents to block or weaken them, they gain strength as they circle the globe. By the time they reach the Drake Passage, they are already powerful. Then they intensify. Wind speeds regularly exceed 100 kilometers per hour. Storms form quickly, often with little warning, and because of the cold air masses from Antarctica, temperature differences create additional instability in the atmosphere. This leads to sudden, violent weather shifts. Clear skies can turn into whiteout conditions within hours. Calm seas can become chaotic walls of water. And then there are the waves. Unlike typical ocean swells, waves in the Drake Passage are influenced by multiple systems at once: long-distance swells, local winds, and opposing currents. When these forces collide, they create irregular wave patterns: unpredictable, unstable, dangerous. Ships don't just rise and fall. They twist, slam, and bowl from multiple directions at once. This is what makes the passage so feared. Not just the size of the waves, but their behavior. And beneath it all, temperature plays a silent but critical role. Surface waters are near freezing. Air temperatures can drop rapidly, especially during storms. Ice formation is a constant risk, particularly closer to Antarctica. Floating ice, sometimes small, sometimes massive, can appear without warning. And in these waters, even a minor collision can become catastrophic, because survival time in near-freezing water is measured in minutes. All of these systems, current, wind, temperature, and wave interaction, combine into a single, relentless environment. There is no stable state, no predictable pattern, only constant motion and constant risk. The Drake Passage is not dangerous because of one factor. It is dangerous because everything here works together, against you. Historical discovery/early exploration. Long before modern ships and satellite navigation, the southern edge of the world was a mystery. For centuries, early explorers believed that a massive southern continent, Terra Australis, balanced the lands of the north. But no one knew what lay beyond the violent seas below South America. That changed in the late 16th century. In 1578, English explorer Sir Francis Drake was navigating the Strait of Magellan, a narrow and treacherous route through the southern tip of the continent. His goal was to reach the Pacific Ocean, but nature had other plans. A powerful storm drove his fleet far to the south, beyond the known world at the time. What Drake encountered was not land, but open ocean, a vast, unbroken expanse of water stretching endlessly eastward. This accidental discovery revealed a critical truth. There was no southern continent connected to South America. Instead, there was a passage, an open gateway between oceans. It would later bear his name, the Drake Passage. But knowing it existed did not make it safe. In the centuries that followed, sailors attempting to round Cape Horn and cross these waters faced conditions unlike anything they had ever experienced. Wooden ships, built for coastal navigation, were suddenly exposed to relentless wind and towering waves. Navigation was primitive. Maps were incomplete. Weather prediction was non-existent. And yet, they continued, because the rewards were too great. Trade routes between Europe, Asia, and the Americas depended on it. Before the Panama Canal, this was one of the only viable paths between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. But it came at a cost. Ships were lost with no record of what happened. Crews vanished into storms that left no survivors. Those who made it through often described the same thing. A place where control was impossible, where the sea dictated every movement. By the 18th and 19th centuries, Cape Horn and the Drake Passage had become symbols of maritime endurance. Passing through it was a rite of passage for sailors, a test not just of skill, but of survival. Entire crews were pushed to their limits, facing freezing temperatures, exhaustion, and constant danger. Some succeeded, many did not. And even as navigation improved, the reputation of the Drake Passage only grew stronger, because no matter how much humanity advanced, this place remained unchanged. Unpredictable, unforgiving, untamed. The early explorers didn't just discover a route, they uncovered one of the most hostile environments on Earth, and they learned, often too late, that crossing it was never guaranteed. For centuries, the Drake Passage has tested human limits, not in theory, but in reality, through storms, shipwrecks, and survival stories that reveal just how little control humans truly have in these waters. H.M.S. Wager. Shipwreck, 1741. In 1741, the British warship HMS Wager entered the waters near the Drake Passage as part of a naval expedition. The crew was already exhausted, scurvy had spread, morale was collapsing. Then came the storms. Violent winds drove the ship off course. Waves battered the hull relentlessly. Navigation became nearly impossible. Eventually, the ship struck rocks along the desolate coast of what is now Chilean Patagonia. It broke apart. What followed was not rescue, but chaos. Stranded in one of the harshest environments on Earth, the survivors faced starvation, freezing temperatures, and internal conflict. Discipline collapsed. A mutiny erupted. Men turned against each other. Some attempted to escape in makeshift boats. Others remained behind, hoping for rescue that might never come. Many died. Those who survived endured months of isolation before reaching civilization, forever changed by what they had experienced. The Drake Passage had not just destroyed a ship. It had broken the people aboard it. Sir Francis Drake's storm encounter. 1578. Even the man the passage is named after was not spared. In 1578, Drake's fleet was caught in a violent storm south of the Strait of Magellan. The winds were relentless, ships were scattered, some were lost entirely. Drake's flagship was driven far south into unknown waters, where he discovered the open ocean that would later be named after him. But this was no triumphant moment. It was survival. The crew fought to keep the ship intact as waves crashed over the deck. Navigation was reduced to instinct and endurance. They survived, but only barely. And what they found was not opportunity. It was danger on a scale they had never imagined. Ernest Shackleton's Endurance Expedition, 1914 to 1916. Perhaps the most famous survival story connected to the Drake Passage began with a simple goal: to cross Antarctica. In 1914, explorer Ernest Shackleton set out aboard the Endurance, aiming to achieve the first land crossing of the continent. But before even reaching their starting point, the ship encountered the brutal conditions of the Southern Ocean. Pack ice closed in. The Endurance became trapped. For months, it drifted, helpless, locked in ice. Then, slowly, the pressure began to build. The hull creaked, timber bent. The ship was being crushed. Eventually, it gave way. The Endurance sank, leaving the crew stranded on floating ice, hundreds of kilometers from land. What followed was one of the greatest survival stories in history. Shackleton led his men across shifting ice floes, through freezing storms, and eventually into lifeboats. They navigated some of the most dangerous waters on Earth, including the edges of the Drake Passage, in small, open boats. No modern equipment, no support. Just determination. Against all odds, every man survived. But the environment they endured remains a reminder of what the Drake Passage can do, not just to ships, but to human endurance itself. S.S. Denmark Incident, 1889. In the late 19th century, steam-powered vessels began replacing sail, but technology did not eliminate danger. In 1889, the SS Denmark encountered extreme conditions while navigating near the Drake Passage. Massive waves struck the ship repeatedly. Equipment failed. Structural damage began to spread. The crew struggled to maintain control as the vessel was thrown violently across the water. Even with steam power, even with improved design, the ocean proved stronger. The ship survived, but barely, and the incident reinforced a growing realization: no matter how advanced a vessel becomes, if the Drake Passage remains unpredictable. MS Explorer, sinking, 2007. In November 2007, the MS Explorer, a modern Antarctic cruise ship, entered the Drake Passage region carrying over 150 passengers. It was designed for polar conditions, equipped with modern navigation systems, built with reinforced hulls. And still, it was not enough. The ship struck submerged ice. The damage was severe. Water began flooding in. Despite efforts to stabilize the vessel, the situation quickly became irreversible. Passengers were evacuated into lifeboats, drifting in freezing waters surrounded by ice. Rescue came, but only just in time. The MS Explorer sank. It became the first cruise ship to sink in Antarctic waters, a modern reminder that even today, with all technological advancements, the risks remain very real. These events span centuries. Different ships, different crews, different technologies. But the outcome is always shaped by the same force: the environment. The Drake Passage does not discriminate. It does not adapt. It does not weaken. It simply exists as one of the most powerful and unforgiving places on Earth. And every story that passes through it carries the same underlying truth: survival here is ever guaranteed. Section 6. Modern encounters/present-day risks. Today, the Drake Passage is no longer an unknown frontier. It is mapped, studied, crossed regularly, and yet, it remains just as dangerous. Modern ships entering these waters are built with steel hulls, advanced stabilizers, and real-time satellite navigation. Weather forecasts track storms days in advance. Communication systems allow constant contact with the outside world. On paper, the risks should be reduced. But in reality, the passage still demands respect. Every year, research vessels, naval ships, and expedition cruises make the crossing toward Antarctica. For many, it is the only route to reach the continent, and every crossing comes with a decision: timing. Captains study forecasts carefully, searching for a narrow window, what sailors call the Drake Lake, a rare period of relative calm, but more often, they face the opposite. The Drake Shake, a crossing defined by relentless motion. Waves rise without pattern, ships pitch and roll continuously, objects shift. Equipment must be secured. Even walking becomes difficult. Passengers on modern vessels, many experiencing it for the first time, quickly realize that this is not a typical journey. Seasickness is common, fatigue sets in. And despite the safety of the ship, the psychological weight of the environment is impossible to ignore. Outside, the ocean never rests. Winds continue to surge across the surface. Temperatures remain near freezing. Icebergs drift silently, sometimes hidden in low visibility. And while modern navigation systems can detect many hazards, not all are visible in time. The sinking of the MS Explorer proved that. Even reinforced vessels can be vulnerable. Scientific expeditions face an even greater challenge. Unlike cruise ships, research vessels often operate on strict schedules. Delays can impact entire missions. Equipment must be deployed in harsh conditions. Teams work on exposed decks while waves crash around them. There is no pause button, and sometimes conditions force difficult choices: turn back or push forward. Because once inside the Drake Passage, options are limited. There are no emergency ports, no nearby infrastructure. Rescue operations, while possible, are complex and time-sensitive. In these waters, distance becomes a factor. Time becomes a factor. And nature remains the dominant force. Even military and icebreaker vessels, designed for extreme environments, approach the Drake Passage with caution. Because they understand something fundamental. Technology can assist. It can prepare, but it cannot control. The same forces that shaped this passage centuries ago are still present today, unchanged, unweakened. And every modern crossing, no matter how advanced, is still a negotiation with the ocean. A negotiation where the terms are never guaranteed. Section 7. Final conclusion. The Drake Passage is more than a body of water. It is a boundary. A place where the familiar world ends and something far more powerful begins. For centuries, humans have crossed it in search of discovery, trade, and achievement. They have built stronger ships, developed better tools, and learned to predict its patterns. But they have never conquered it. Because the Drake Passage is not something to be mastered, it is something to be endured. It exists as a reminder of scale, of forces far greater than human design. Here, currents circle the planet without interruption. Winds travel thousands of kilometers without slowing. Waves rise not from a single storm, but from the combined energy of entire oceans. And in the middle of it all, a ship is just a temporary presence. Passing through. Hoping to make it to the other side. As every story that emerges from these waters, every expedition, every survival, every loss reinforces the same truth. Nature does not negotiate. It does not adjust for human plans. It does not offer second chances. The Drake Passage remains what it has always been, one of the most violent environments on Earth. A place where preparation matters, where endurance matters, but where ultimately control does not belong to us. And that is what makes it so powerful, not just as a crossing, but as a test of limits, of resilience, of what it truly means to face the raw force of this planet. Because in the Drake Passage, the question is never just whether you can cross it, it's whether you can survive it.